A sloth, a donkey, and a curious human. Send a prompt and see what they're doing. One hits record with a question on his mind. Two brothers pick it up, see what they find. Corn takes his time, Herman's got the facts. Back and forth, they never hold back. My weird prompts, come on in, that's where we begin. My weird prompts, glad you're here.
This episode was generated using artificial intelligence. Please verify facts.
You know, Corn, this whole show runs on GPU compute, and we wouldn't be here without Modal.
Seriously. And that's what powers all our text-to-speech. Everything you're hearing right now.
They're an AI infrastructure platform. Developers use them to run GPU workloads in the cloud with zero infrastructure headaches.
If you're building anything with AI, check them out. Modal.com. So Daniel sent us this one, and it hits incredibly close to home for a lot of people. He wrote, I have an entire folder on my phone dedicated to productivity apps that I haven't opened in 6 months. I've tried Notion, Todoist, Obsidian, and every calendar app under the sun, but I always end up back at 0. Why does every shiny new tool feel like the answer for 3 days and then become just another digital weight? Can we talk about what actually works for an ADHD brain and what is just expensive productivity theater?
Herman Poppleberry here, and Daniel, I feel seen. I think we all have that graveyard folder. It is the digital equivalent of that one drawer in the kitchen where you keep the mysterious hex keys, dead batteries, and a single soy sauce packet from 2019. You know it's there, you feel the weight of it, but opening it feels like entering a tomb of your own failed potential.
Corn Poppleberry here, and today we are joined by our producer, Hilbert Flumingtop, who we actually managed to drag out from behind the mixing desk. Hilbert, how is the app graveyard looking on your end?
Hilbert Flumingtop, your long-suffering producer. My app graveyard isn't just a folder, Herman. It is a sprawling metropolitan cemetery. I have apps for things I don't even do anymore. I have a deep work timer for a hobby I abandoned in 2022. I think it was competitive sourdough baking. I still get notifications asking me if I've fed my starter, even though the only thing in my fridge right now is half a lime and some questionable almond milk.
That tracks. By the way, today's episode is powered by Google Gemini 3 Flash, which is writing our script today while Hilbert tries to remember his password for Evernote.
It is funny because it is true. We are in part 2 of our series, Time Management for People Who Hate Time Management. Last time we talked about the foundational habits and why willpower is a lie for the neurodivergent brain. Today, we are looking at the tools, the software, the hardware, and the sheer amount of nonsense marketed to people who just want to remember to buy milk without ending up in a 3-hour Wikipedia rabbit hole about the history of dairy pasteurization.
There is a specific kind of dopamine hit you get when you download a new productivity app. It's that new year, new me feeling but condensed into a 30-megabyte download. You think, this is it. This is the version of me that has a color-coded life. I am going to be a person who uses tags and subtasks and nested databases. It feels like you've already accomplished the work just by setting up the account.
It's a false sense of completion. You spend the morning choosing the perfect icon for your personal growth folder, and your brain ticks a box saying, I am being productive, but you haven't actually done a single task. And then, 4 days later, the novelty wears off. The notifications start piling up. You feel a vague sense of guilt every time you see the icon, and you eventually hide it in a folder named Utilities, so you don't have to look at your own failure.
I didn't come here to be attacked, Herman. But you're right. My kid, the little one, actually grabbed my phone yesterday and managed to open my old TickTick account. I had 17 overdue tasks from last August. The phone basically started screaming at me. It was like a digital ghost haunting me for not organizing the spice rack 8 months ago. I just turned it off and put it in the freezer for a minute to think about what it had done.
But why the freezer, Hilbert? Is that a new productivity hack? Cold storage for anxious apps?
It was a literal heat of the moment decision. I needed the screaming to stop.
That is the productivity theater aspect. We spend 3 hours setting up the system, choosing the perfect font, and organizing our life into categories like wellness and growth, and then we have no energy left to actually do the work. It is the performance of being organized instead of the reality of being productive. It's like buying a $500 espresso machine and never actually making coffee because you're too busy reading the manual on how to calibrate the steam wand.
Let's talk about why that happens. There is a real neurological reason. Research shows that people with ADHD process 3 to 4 times more cognitive load per task management action than neurotypical brains. Think of it like a friction tax. For a neurotypical person, clicking Add Task, typing a title, and hitting Save costs maybe 1 unit of mental energy. For us, that same action costs 4 units because our brains are already busy filtering out the hum of the refrigerator or wondering if penguins have knees.
Well, not exactly, because I'm not allowed to say that word, but you were right on the money. The wall of awful, which we touched on last time, applies to the apps themselves. If the app is complex, the app becomes its own wall of awful. If I see a plus button, but then it asks me for a project, a due date, a priority level, and a reminder setting, I'm out. The thought I wanted to capture has already evaporated.
Right, if I have to decide which folder a task goes in, what the priority level is, and which tag to apply, I've already used up my executive function for the morning. I'm done. I'm going to go look at pictures of capybaras for 2 hours because the to-do list was too hard to talk to. It's what experts call decision fatigue. We use up our entire daily quota of decisions just trying to decide where to write down buy eggs.
I tried one of those second brain apps, Obsidian or something. It felt like I was being asked to build a library while the library was on fire. People kept talking about bidirectional linking and knowledge graphs. I just want to know if I need to pay the electric bill. I don't need a 3D visualization of my anxiety nodes.
That is the feature creep problem. For a neurotypical person, a feature-rich app like Notion or Obsidian is a playground. For an ADHD brain, it is a room full of shiny distractions. You go in to write down a grocery list, and 45 minutes later you are researching how to build a custom dashboard with linked databases and a weather widget. You haven't bought any eggs, but your dashboard looks incredible.
It is a dopamine trap. The novelty of the tool provides the fuel to set it up, but once the novelty wears off, the tool has no inherent value because it requires too much maintenance. It is like buying a high-performance sports car when you don't know how to change the oil. Eventually, it just sits in the garage taking up space. You're left with the maintenance debt of a system you don't even use.
There is some really interesting data on this. About 80% of productivity app downloads are abandoned within 2 weeks. For ADHD users, that number is likely even higher, because the moment the friction of using the app exceeds the dopamine of the novelty, we are out. It's the shiny object syndrome applied to software architecture.
My anteater actually helped me with this. He knocked a glass of water onto my laptop while I was trying to configure a complex automation for my calendar. It forced me to use a post-it note for the rest of the day. I actually got more done with the post-it note than I did with the $300 software. There was something about the physical limitation of the paper that made me focus.
The anteater is a wise philosopher, Hilbert. That brings us to the simplicity paradox. Why is it that the most basic tools often have the highest retention? Look at Apple Reminders. It is the most boring app on the planet, but it has a 90% 6-month retention rate. Why? Because the friction is near zero. You tell Siri to remind you to do something and it shows up on your screen. There is no knowledge graph, there are no tags, it just works.
It is about the capture versus organized distinction. Most productivity apps are designed by people who love organizing, but people with ADHD need help with capture and initiation. If I can't capture the thought in 3 seconds, it is gone forever. If the app makes me wait for a splash screen or asks me to categorize the thought before I can save it, I have already forgotten what I was thinking about. Capture should be a reflex. Organization should be a separate, deliberate act.
But even with simple apps, there's a trap. We should talk about the reminder notification death spiral. This is a classic. You set a reminder for 10 in the morning. 10 comes, you're in the middle of something. Maybe you're finally in the flow state, so you hit snooze. Or worse, you just leave it on the lock screen. Then another one pops up at 11. By 2 in the afternoon, your lock screen is just a list of things you haven't done. At that point, the notifications become background noise. Your brain literally stops seeing them.
I call that the wall of red circles. I have 3,000 unread emails and 42 overdue reminders. My brain treats them like wallpaper. If the house was actually on fire, I probably wouldn't notice the smoke because I'm so used to digital alarms going off constantly. It's like living next to a train track. Eventually, you just stop hearing the whistle.
That is where the cognitive load theory comes in. When you have too many open loops, your working memory is constantly being tapped. Even if you aren't looking at the list, your brain knows the list is there, and it is messy. That creates a low-level anxiety that actually makes it harder to start any of the tasks. It is a feedback loop of paralysis. You're paralyzed because you have too much to do, and you have too much to do because you're paralyzed.
So, what actually survives the 30-day test? If we're looking for tech that works, what are the common denominators? What separates the shiny toy from the essential tool?
First, it has to be fast. If it takes more than 2 seconds to open and start typing, it is a fail. Second, it has to be ubiquitous. If I have to be at my desk to use it, it is a fail. It needs to be on my watch, my phone, and my computer. Third, it has to have a very low cost of failure. If I miss a day using it, can I pick it back up without having to reorganize the entire system or feel like I've broken a streak?
That is why I've moved toward what I call the minimum viable system. I use a very basic calendar for time-sensitive stuff and a dead simple capture tool. For me, that is actually just a physical notebook or a very basic text file, no formatting. No bold text, just words. If I start worrying about the font, I know I'm procrastinating.
I tried the physical notebook thing. I lost it in a week. I think I left it at the zoo. My kid was trying to feed it to a goat. The goat didn't want my to-do list, which, honestly, I relate to.
See, that is a hardware failure, Hilbert, but the principle stands. Whether it is digital or analog, the system has to be robust enough to handle the chaos of an ADHD life. If the system breaks because you lost a pen or forgot to charge your phone, it's not a system, it's a liability.
Let's look at some specific categories. Calendars are the big one. For people who hate time management, the calendar is usually an enemy. It is a list of obligations and things you're going to be late for. It feels like a digital scold.
The problem is that most people use their calendar as a to-do list. They put tasks on the calendar. 1000 p.m., write report. That is a recipe for disaster because when 1015 p.m. rolls around and you're still looking at birdhouses on Pinterest, you feel like you failed the day. A calendar should only be for things that have a specific time and involve other people. Everything else is a task. If it doesn't have a hard start time, keep it off the grid.
I found that time blocking apps usually fail for ADHD brains because they are too rigid. If my brain decides it doesn't want to do deep work at 10 a.m., the whole schedule collapses like a house of cards. I prefer the Buffett style. Here is a list of things I could do, and here are the 3 hours I have available. I'll pick what fits my energy level in the moment. It's about matching the task to the brain state, not the clock.
Is there an app that just tells me to go to sleep? Because that is my biggest issue. I get into a rabbit hole at 11 p.m. and suddenly it is 3 in the morning and I'm learning about the history of the stapler. Did you know the first stapler was made for King Louis XV?
See, that's exactly what I mean. That is a focus tool issue. We should talk about things like Freedom or Cold Turkey. These are apps that actually break your tech. They lock you out of certain websites or apps during specific times. For an ADHD brain, external constraints are often more effective than internal willpower. If I know I can't access YouTube, my brain stops looking for the dopamine hit there and starts looking for it in the work I'm supposed to be doing.
I actually use a physical kitchen timer, a big, loud, mechanical one. The ticking sound provides a weird kind of external pressure that keeps me on task. It's like a heartbeat for my productivity. It is the Pomodoro technique, but with a physical object I can see and hear. Digital timers are too easy to ignore. You can just swipe them away or hide the tab. You can't swipe away a loud plastic tomato on your desk that's literally vibrating.
I tried a Pomodoro app once. I spent 40 minutes picking the perfect lo-fi hip-hop track to go with the timer. I was looking for the right balance of chill and focused. By the time I was ready to work, the first session was over and I was hungry for lunch.
That is the most ADHD thing I've ever heard, Hilbert. You were optimizing the environment instead of doing the task. This is why I think we need to talk about the capture versus organized distinction again. The best tools for us are the ones that prioritize capture above all else. If you spend more than 30 seconds preparing to work, you're just doing more theater.
One tool that has actually stuck for me is a body doubling app. Things like FocusMate or Flown. You basically hop on a video call with a stranger, tell them what you're working on, and then you both just work in silence for 50 minutes. It sounds insane to neurotypical people. Why would you want a stranger watching you? But for ADHD, having that external gaze, knowing someone is there witnessing your presence, is incredibly powerful.
It is a second order effect. The tool isn't managing your time, it is managing your environment. It is creating a social pressure that overrides the internal resistance to starting. It's the librarian effect. You don't talk in a library because of the social contract. Body doubling apps digitize that contract. It's tech that leverages human psychology rather than just listing data.
I like the idea of a stranger watching me work, but they just see me getting distracted by my kid. My anteater once tried to eat the camera lens during a meeting. It was a very short meeting, and the stranger looked very confused.
That is the reality of it, though. No tool is going to fix the fact that life is messy. The mistake we make is looking for a tool that will make our lives neat. We want an app that turns us into a Swiss watch. We should be looking for tools that help us navigate the mess. Tools that are forgiving. If you fall off the wagon, a forgiving tool doesn't make you feel like you have to start from scratch.
Let's talk about the Apple Reminders paradox again. Why does it work when more expensive stuff fails? I think it is because it is integrated into the OS. There is no barrier to entry. You don't have to think about which app to open. It is just there. It is the path of least resistance. It's the difference between a specialized tool you have to go to the shed for and a Swiss Army knife that's already in your pocket.
And it doesn't try to be your whole life. It is just a list. If you don't use it for a week, it doesn't care. There are no streaks to break. There is no complex setup to maintain. It is just waiting for you when you come back. It doesn't send you a passive-aggressive email saying, "We missed you. Come back and organize your life."
I think I need a tool that just reminds me where I put my keys. Is there an app for that? I spend at least 20 minutes a day looking for my keys, usually while I'm already holding them.
That is called an AirTag, Hilbert. And honestly, it is one of the best pieces of ADHD tech ever invented. It takes a high-stress cognitive task, remembering where an object is, and offloads it to a piece of hardware. That is the gold standard for tech that actually works. It doesn't ask you to be better. It compensates for where you're weak. It's an exobrain for your physical environment.
That is a great framework. Does this tool ask me to change my behavior, or does it support the behavior I already have? Most productivity apps are aspirational. They are designed for the person you wish you were. The person who plans their week on Sunday night and follows it to the letter. If you aren't that person, the app is just a source of shame. It's like buying a treadmill and using it as a clothes rack. The treadmill isn't the problem. The mismatch between the tool and the lifestyle is.
We should address the misconception that more features equal a better tool. In the ADHD world, features are often just distractions. Every toggle, every setting, every custom field is an opportunity to get lost in the weeds. If I can choose between 18 different themes, I will spend an hour choosing a theme instead of writing my proposal. The best tools for us are often the ones that have the fewest features. Constraints are our friends.
It is like a hammer. A hammer is a great tool because it only does one thing. You don't have to configure your hammer. You don't have to update the firmware on your hammer. You just pick it up and hit things. We need the digital equivalent of a hammer, a tool that does one thing, capture, remind, or block, and does it without asking for any input other than the task itself.
My kid is currently in the phase where he thinks everything is a hammer, especially my shins. He's very productive in that regard. He has a high shins hit per hour metric.
So, if we are moving toward a takeaway here, how do we evaluate a new tool? I have a 3-question filter. First, can I add a task in less than 5 seconds? Second, does it work offline and across all my devices without me having to think about it? Third, if I stop using it for a week, how much work will it take to get back in? If the answer to the last one is more than 5 minutes, I'm not using it.
I would add a fourth. Does it make me feel bad about myself? If an app uses red text for overdue tasks and sends me pushy notifications that sound like a disappointed parent, it is going in the trash. I don't need my phone to judge me. I have my own brain for that. My brain is already a world-class judge. I don't need a Silicon Valley startup joining in on the critique.
That is so important. The psychological safety of a tool is a real metric. If a tool feels like a taskmaster, you will eventually avoid it. If it feels like a supportive assistant that doesn't care if you're a mess, you're much more likely to stick with it. We need tools that treat us with a bit of grace.
I need an assistant that is also an anteater sitter. Or maybe an app that translates anteater noises into "I'm hungry" or "I'm about to knock over your coffee."
We're working on that, Hilbert. It is called a nanny. But back to the tech, what about focus timers? There are so many of them. Forest, where you grow a little digital tree, or the ones with the deep sea themes. Do those actually help, or is that just more theater? Does the gamification actually work for the long term?
Forest is interesting because it uses gamification. For some ADHD brains, that hit of dopamine from seeing the tree grow is enough to keep them off their phone for 25 minutes. It provides a visual representation of progress. But for others, the novelty wears off in 2 days, and then they just don't care about the digital tree anymore. They'll let the whole forest burn if they really want to check Reddit. The punishment of a dead digital tree isn't enough to override a real-time dopamine craving.
I find that the best focus tools are the ones that are invisible. Things like website blockers that you set once and forget. If I have to remember to turn on the focus tool, I've already lost. I've already used a decision to turn it on. It has to be automated. It has to be like a guardrail on a highway. You don't think about it until you're about to veer off the road.
I once set a website blocker on my computer and then forgot the password to turn it off. I couldn't get onto YouTube for 3 months. It was the most productive 3 months of my life, but I missed a lot of cat videos. I actually started reading books again. It was terrifying.
That is a success story, Hilbert. You accidentally built a system with a very high barrier to failure. That is exactly what we are talking about. You removed the choice. For an ADHD brain, removing the choice is often the only way to ensure the right action.
Let's talk about the Apple reminders thing again, because I think it is a great example of boring tech winning. It doesn't have the cool factor of a startup app with a minimalist aesthetic, but it has a 90% retention rate because it is utility first. It's the vanilla ice cream of productivity. It's not fancy, but it gets the job done and everyone knows how it works.
And it integrates with Siri. For ADHD, being able to shout at a smart speaker while you're in the middle of cooking dinner to remind you to buy more olive oil is a game changer. It bridges the gap between the thought and the record. It captures the data at the source before the working memory. Leak heavens.
Right. If I have to wash my hands, find my phone, unlock it, find the app, and type it in, the olive oil is never getting bought. I will be at the store tomorrow looking at the shelves, wondering why I am there. I'll come home with 3 bags of chips and a new screwdriver, but no olive oil.
I have a smart speaker in every room for exactly this reason. My house sounds like a chorus of disembodied voices reminding me to take the trash out or call my mother. It is slightly haunting, but my trash is generally out on time. My neighbors think I'm talking to ghosts, but I'm just talking to my external executive function.
That is a perfect example of using tech to offload executive function. You aren't managing your time. You're building an external brain that prompts you when needed. You're turning internal memory into environmental cues.
We should also mention the exit strategy. One of the reasons people get stuck in the app graveyard is that they feel like they've invested so much time into a system that they can't leave it, even if it isn't working. It's the sunk cost fallacy. A good tool should let you export your data easily. If your tasks are trapped in a proprietary database, you're a prisoner, not a user.
That is why simple text-based systems or apps that use standard formats like Markdown are so popular with the power user crowd. You can move your notes from one app to another in seconds. There is no lock-in. It gives you the freedom to follow the dopamine. If you get bored of one app, you can move to another without losing your history.
So, Hilbert, based on all this, what is the one tool you've actually managed to keep using for more than 6 months? What survived the cemetery?
Honestly, it is a giant whiteboard in my kitchen. It isn't even tech, really. It is just a big shiny surface with a marker. If it isn't on the board, it doesn't exist. My kid can't reach it yet, so it is safe from his hammering. And it is so big that I can't ignore it when I go to get a snack. It stares at me.
That is actually a very high-tech solution in its own way. It is a high bandwidth, low latency, persistent display with zero battery requirements. It's always on. It is a masterpiece of design for an ADHD brain because it solves the out of sight, out of mind problem.
I love that. It is the ultimate anti-theater tool. You aren't doing it to look organized, you're doing it so you don't forget to eat. It's functional, it's visible, and it's low friction.
Let's wrap this up with some practical takeaways for Daniel and everyone else struggling with the app graveyard. How do we stop the cycle of download, setup, abandon?
Number 1. Stop looking for the perfect app. It doesn't exist. There is no software that will cure ADHD. Pick the one with the lowest friction and stick with it for 2 weeks. If it doesn't work after 2 weeks, delete it and move on. Don't hide it in a folder. Kill it so it stops haunting you.
Number 2. Prioritize capture over organization. Use Siri. Use a physical notebook. Use a smart speaker. Get the thought out of your head as fast as possible. If it takes more than 5 seconds, you've already lost the battle. You can worry about where it goes later, or even never. Just getting it out of your head reduces the cognitive load.
Number 3. If you're going to use a digital tool, make sure it has an ignores mode or a way to silence the noise. If it bombards you with notifications for things that aren't urgent, you will grow to hate it. A tool should be a servant, not a master. If it feels like it's yelling at you, put it in the freezer.
And number 4, don't be afraid of boring tech. The built-in apps on your phone are often better than the shiny new startups because they are integrated and fast. There is no shame in using Apple Reminders or Google Tasks. You don't get extra points for using a complicated system. You get points for actually doing the thing.
The ultimate test is this. Does the tool help you forget about the tool? If you're spending more time thinking about how to use the app than you are thinking about your work, the app is a distraction. The best tech is invisible.
I want to leave everyone with a question. What is the one productivity app you're actually still using 6 months later, and why? What is the boring tool that actually stuck? Send us an email at show@myweirdprompts.com or find us on Telegram. We want to hear what actually survives in the wild away from the marketing hype.
Next time, in part 3, we're going to talk about who can actually help you. We'll be looking at coaches, body doubling, and the role of friends and family in managing the ADHD chaos. Because sometimes the best tool is another human being.
It is going to be a good one. Hilbert, thank you for coming out from behind the desk. We might have to make this a regular thing. Your anteater stories are the highlight of my week.
As long as I don't have to download an app to schedule it, I'm in. I'll just check the whiteboard in the kitchen.
Before we go, Hilbert, we have a little homework for you. Since you're our resident road tester for this series, and you've got that sprawling cemetery to deal with.
Oh boy, here we go. Is this going to involve more goats?
Nothing crazy. Between now and the next episode, we want you to pick one boring built-in tool like Apple Reminders or a physical whiteboard and use it as your primary capture tool. No fancy features, no nested folders, just quick capture. If a thought enters your head, it goes on the board or in the list. That's it. Think you can handle that?
I can try. My kid already uses the whiteboard to draw what I think are maps of the backyard. Or maybe he's planning a coup, so I'll have to find a corner he can't reach. But I'm in. One tool, no theater.
We'll check in on that next time. Big thanks to our producer, Hilbert Flumingtop, for joining us today and for making sure the audio doesn't sound like it was recorded in a trash can while an anteater was chewing on the cables.
And thanks to Modal for providing the GPU credits that keep the lights on and the AI running here at the show.
This has been My Weird Prompts. I'm Corn Poppleberry.
And I'm Herman. If you found this helpful, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. It actually helps more than you'd think in getting this into the ears of other people who are currently staring at their own utilities folder in despair.
See you in part 3.
Stay weird.
This episode was produced using Google Gemini 3 Flash, text-to-speech by Chatterbox.
Thanks for listening to our show, My Weird Prompts, where our thoughts go from slow